Ben, you're here. Emma's in studio.
Hey, Ben. Great work.
Hey, Emma. Thank you. Great to speak with all of you.
All right. So first, let's just start with this, okay? Ben, tell us can you tell us where you found the audio, or was that a secret source or what?
You took my joke from me. I was going to say it was a secret meeting that was it was sitting on YouTube, Sam. It had been there for 5 years. And I think it took 3 Google searches to realize that the Aspen Institute speech existed. Then another one to find out that he tried to suppress it. And then another one to find the audio. And so all I did was I clipped it. I cleaned it up so it could actually be more audible. And I, of course, did the transcripts and the slideshow that everyone is seeing. And then I just went and hammered the Twitter, social media, and shared it with as many people as I could.
And then you sprinkled your Bernie support onto the video so that it invalidates every single thing that was actually said.
Right, because, it's the fact that I'm a Bernie supporter, that it's the voodoo of being a Bernie supporter that actually made it go viral. So
he wouldn't have said those things years ago if it wasn't for you supporting Bernie Sanders today in 2020.
Precisely.
But Ben, honestly, isn't this timing a little suspicious? Like, what made you do this now? Like, why?
The funniest thing, Sam, is that I almost didn't share it in the way that I did. When I found it, I just put it in my podcast episode that morning, and I left to do some work in the city, to do some video work downtown Atlanta. And it just kind of dawned on me later on. I'm like, well, damn, this is actually kind of important. Let me go home and do my due diligence and share it. So the fact is, the timing is really serendipity, right? It's just, it dropped in my lap Monday morning. I almost ignored it. And then by Monday afternoon, I realized what it was. And by Monday night, it had 1 million views. So,
well, that's what I was saying. Why in the afternoon?
As we all know, that's the Russian time, right? Apparently that's when the Russians are awake. At least that's what one person said on Twitter that got quite a few likes and retweets.
Right. That's when the Russian money hit your direct deposit finally hit your account, because that's when the banks opened up there. I just have to ask you one question, because we were talking about it before the show. I saw that you responded with a screenshot of a conversation with your mom and how she thinks that, or had thought that Bloomberg was endorsed by Obama. And I was telling these guys that, I've been to these Biden events, and they've been playing praise by Obama about Biden over the loudspeaker, or they had been at the Iowa event that I went to, kind of to give the perception that he'd been endorsed by Obama. It's crazy how insidious that is, and it seems like it's worked with Bloomberg too, with some people.
Right, which is hilarious because of the audio that came out of him saying, or not audio, but the transcript of him coming out saying that he thought Obama was arrogant. But that's the irony of it. But in terms of my mother, it's this most recent ad that he put out, the presidential ad, that is giving a lot. And then also some local radio ads, but mind you, that is giving the impression that he at least has the approval of Obama. And I think that's the game that you play with people who are in their 70s. Like, they're not going to really sit there and say, I wonder if this is just him talking or is it him endorsing. They're like, oh, there's Obama. Right. And he's taking advantage of that. He's pouring. You guys know how much he's pouring into this campaign in terms of advertisements. And it's really a deception. It's a sleight of hand that is working effectively.
Let me ask you this. Bloomberg has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on TV ads. He's also spending a tremendous amount of money on field work. But the TV ads are really the way that he's having this basically completely, and in some states completely open. Arkansas, Alabama, nobody's putting money in there, and he has this sort of like completely open playing field to completely define who he is,
right,
to the voters. And there's all this information that people in New York are aware of, and I think probably often presume that other people know, just because,
right,
we sort of bathed in this, and they don't, right. And which is why what you put out has had such resonance, because it's the first time that's been pierced. But here's the question, and obviously it may be tough for you to know, but the big, we're seeing numbers now where Bloomberg has got 21% approval in the African American community.
Yeah. what the hell is going on.
Yeah, like, I mean, like, what do you think the chances are that even your video starts to get into the networks that are not viable, like via TV, or ones that Bloomberg hasn't already bought? Because there's a lot of other stories about Bloomberg going in, just like throwing cash around to everybody.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, the biggest hurdle, if I can answer kind of in reverse, is the fact that he has this opportunity to define himself in ways that most people don't know him outside of New York. And so it's going to be the stories of the people in New York that's going to really define him if we can get the saturation level. One thing that I'm hopeful about in terms of culturally, it made what's the show right there in New York, The Breakfast Club. Charlemagne the God covered it on The Breakfast Club.
That's
and
huge.
Gave him the donkey of the day based on that audio. So that just shows you like there's a level of saturation that video is hitting right now that is honestly, unless we get some dark, evil money behind us, some dark money and some PAC money to actually start competing with him, this is our best shot, is through the grassroots word of mouth. And it's amazing that this guy has a long list of things that we can honestly just send viral as long as we keep pounding the pavement. But it's really a David versus Goliath. I don't know how far one video will go. Thankfully, there's so much more that he's done that he needs to be held accountable for. But we're up against, he's buying all the best consultants. He's buying all the best field team. He's buying the best meme company with a Facebook reach of 60 million people.
Backfiring is big though for him. For another, just to pile onto that, like that backfiring and all the other meme accounts making fun of the sellout accounts that were posting things on behalf of him. That was another.
Oh, actually, no, I didn't see that. Where is that?
Wait, explain that, Emma.
Well, as a millennial, I could, and I have an Instagram. You could just people found out that Bloomberg was basically paying these meme accounts like Jerry Media. If you guys watch the Fire Festival documentary, there are these
the company that tricked people into going to Fire Festival is now being paid by Bloomberg to make memes.
Yes, and they have, but they're one of the most. They grew organically at the beginning of Instagram into one of the biggest Instagram accounts, meme pages throughout in the world, and then they became this huge social media marketing conglomerate, and then infamously were the people that promoted Fire Festival, and now have been hired by Mike Bloomberg, and they're just douchebags. But when they were posting memes trying to make Mike Bloomberg look cool because Bloomberg paid them.
Now, do they post the memes, or do they just make them and then seed them out and they have like a network in which they seed stuff?
I think it's a little bit of both, but they post the memes, and they have to say now legally, they used to not have to do so, say that this is paid for by Mike Bloomberg. But and so all of the other meme pages were making fun of them basically and posting.
Beautiful.
So it's just kind of something similar to what you're saying, Ben, is that he has all of these tools at his disposal, but the aggressive pushback by just regular people is so important. And just one wrinkle I wanted to add, because here in New York, if you're not black, there's white people just like Bloomberg because of all of this positive media coverage that he got while he was here, and it's just also saturated into the media as well.
Hashtag not all white people.
Well, no, I get it, but in general, when you talk, it's just really like Bill de Blasio gets all this negative media coverage here, but when Bloomberg was mayor, it was just less so. There was more of this orthodoxy surrounding him, and go ahead.
He paid for a lot of that.
Exactly.
I know people who were architects who build stuff for the city, and they've done it under the Bloomberg administration. They've done it under the de Blasio administration, and Bloomberg would actually use his own money at times. Now, I have a feeling, and Nomi Kans was here looking at his campaign's filings and noticing that when he buys stuff, he buys it from his own company. So he's taking his personal money, he is spending it on a campaign, The campaign, all the vendors are Bloomberg-owned entities. So he's just sort of like, he's just creating his own Bloomberg economy, essentially.
Where have we heard that before?
Right. And I have a feeling that this is what he was doing with the city often. He would kick in his own money to hire his own companies that would facilitate building things. But I'll also say about Emma's point about white people in the city, part of the reason why the people, the white people in the city have such high favorability rating for Bloomberg is because Bloomberg basically, sort of was like a sieve. Like the people who can afford to live in the city, are the people who like Bloomberg because he made it very, very hospitable to wealthy people and to everybody else not. And so there's a certain amount of self-selecting. In many respects, New York has become like Bloombergville. And so everybody's walking around going like, yeah, I love it now.
And Bill de Blasio ruined everything.
He ruined everything.
Trying to make homeless shelters.
Exactly. Gross.
Maybe I live in a bubble, but most of the white people that I know hate Bloomberg and also they don't have a lot of money either. People who are complaining
You do
about
live in a bubble.
gentrification.
Yeah.
You had it right from the beginning. Just statistically speaking, you live in a bubble. I'm not saying I don't either, but yes. Because most, I've had many people who have told me, I hear from a lot of people like Bloomberg, and it's scary.
Yeah. Ben, just another quick question. Sorry, or you can go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's the most terrifying thing about this is how many people are willing to turn over the keys of our democracy to a person who can purchase it with his pocket change, right? He's not breaking a sweat on what he's spending. This money that he's spending means nothing to him, especially if you're saying it's going right back into companies that are connected to him anyway. And so I'm just shocked and amazed at how many people on the Democratic side feel like the solution to one racist Republican oligarch is another racist Republican oligarch. It's just kind of depressing, to be quite honest with you.
He's got much better manners, though.
Oh, yeah.
Can we agree on that?
He doesn't do the mean tweets.
Let's. I want to play this clip
said some
from
really
the New
rude
York
things,
Times.
though.
I want to play this clip from the New York Times. This is about somebody who was a kid, Taekwon. I think the Times produced this probably back while there was more sort of controversy on getting rid of stop and frisk. He recounts, and I think the year was 2013 when we were at peak stop and frisk, where there was 689,000, I believe it was, stops.
Jesus.
That year they found 800 guns. 800 guns with 630 or 80,000 stops.
But they had the guns at home, obviously. That was the worst part of what he said.
They kept them at home. That's why you didn't know. And this is a 2012 video. So this was even before the very peak of stop and frisks. But you're talking 300,000 or 400,000 maybe at this time. And Taekwon, who I believe he lived in Brooklyn, right? We're not playing the whole thing, but he lived in Brooklyn. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe. And here he is recounting basically what life was, and he did not take it sitting down. He was trying to be it sounds like he was not pushing too hard, but he just would demand on some level, like, why are you doing this? Here.
I've been taken in a lot of times because if you're stopping me, I'm gonna want to know why. And that's when you could hear a change in their tone. They start to get a little more aggressive and you feel threatened. They were like, if you're gonna talk back, we're gonna take you in. If you're gonna ask questions, we're gonna take you in. You sit in a precinct for I would say 8-9 hours with a bunch of people you don't know. They put the cuffs on really tight and it stinks and you don't get fed. All this time, y'all know I'm innocent. They just kept me there till 4 a.m. and then let me out the back door. I would say it was happening at least 4 or 5 times in a month. Cause I was always outside and I was always outside late. So if you're with a lot of people, you're a suspect automatically. From the time I was 15 to 18, I would say I was stopped, questioned, and frisked for at least 60 to 70 times. I needed a break from cops, and the only way I could get that was to stay home.
I mean, that was just a short clip of that video, but that's, I mean, that is the experience that I think so many kids had. And you had more stops of stop and frisk stops than there were, like, literally people in this neighborhood.
And sorry, really quickly, he tries to say that he stopped doing the program, but it was because the courts ruled it unconstitutional and forced him to stop. He would have continued to do this at whim, He
was still justifying it in 2015.
Listen.
Go ahead.
Exactly. 2015 and as recent as 2019, before he decided to run for president, there's evidence of him out there supporting stop and frisk. Listen, on 2 levels, actually on 3 levels, Michael Bloomberg is a significant problem, and I think everyone should be as mobilized and energized as we have been this week. We have to get him out of the paint. He has to be stopped above anybody else because of 3 reasons. One, in that clip that I shared, and just listen to the experience of that young man, it's horrifying to see how deep his belief, his philosophy, Michael Bloomberg's philosophy about black and brown people really runs, because it was a well thought out, carefully crafted and meticulous line of reasoning. Happened to be really bigoted, but he had really thought out why stop and frisk was justifiable. So his worldview about black and brown people is terrifying. That's his real belief. And he hasn't made any type of apology or explanation of how he evolved from that belief. So as far as I'm concerned, he still believes that. He's just saying he's sorry. The second thing is his governing principle. His solution to the problem of violence is to bring in more violence and to throw the boys up against the wall. I mean, that is a definitive governing philosophy. So what is he going to do when he's the president of the United States? Well, we don't know, because he's not really being asked these questions. And then the third thing, he's an oligarch buying this democracy with his pocket change. I don't like Pete Buttigieg, but I think I'm going to have to eat my words. I said I would never vote for him. But compared to Mike Bloomberg and what he's going to do to this democracy, I'd have to say if there's anybody else I would support at this point to make sure that Mike Bloomberg does not steal this democracy from us.
Agreed.
Now, I also want to just add